this weather. Can you hear it? The mist is such you can't see the mountains again. It reminds me of a strange summer. I was 20 years ago or more. I was a school teacher. Before I became a true hunter. And I had the job in the summer. One of our students, called Carl, had fallen ill. And his parents were away. They worked overseas. He was meant to stay at the school, but he'd had a cough so bad it was felt that now he was better, he ought to recuperate. And the school had its property far in the north. It had once belonged, I think, to an old headmaster. And he had left it to the school in case they needed it for out-of-bounds activities. I'd never been there. It was a long train journey through lowlands and heather, and then more, and beautiful mountain, opening out the scintillating lakes. Not that you saw the mountains, not once you were in them, because as the midges rose, the rains came down. After a day, we came to a ferry that took us across a channel lined with rocks and a cold wind. I remember standing out. I was the only one who did. Funny even in those times, as the rain arced down and bit my face. And I saw the isle we were going to rise before me, dark, covered in mist. Suddenly, the lad I was looking after, Carl, was by my side, and he shivered and said, "Do you think there are deer on the mountains? Do you think I could hunt them?" And I looked at him. He was 15 years old, and a peaceful chap as you could meet. Hunting deer was the last thing you would think that he would do. And I said, "Are you all right?" And it was true. He was looking, staring at the island. And he whispered to me, "I think I've been here before," in a strange voice that seemed lost. Well, I knew he hadn't. Of course I knew he hadn't. He had spent most of his life, until last year, abroad. But I said nothing. We landed and we spent that night in a bed and breakfast in relative civilization. And the next day, the pair of us took a bus into the middle of the moor and then hiked, me carrying the supplies, up over a hill, and there, remote, was the little bovey. It was the kind of place, it is true, that they send criminals or delinquents or people who are ill, for there was a keen wind, and although the air was damp, there was a vitality in the salt tang. Carl looked at the hills and said, "You could run over those. You could run far and free. They couldn't catch you there." And again I looked at him. And again he shook and shivered and said, "Any chance of a fire?" Well, actually there was every chance, for I have exaggerated about the primitiveness of the bovey. It was true I felt as I arrived that it was the last place in the arse end of nowhere, but actually there was a housekeeper and she had left us adequate supplies, in addition to what I had bought, and lots of firewood. So I lit a fire and told him stories, ghost stories obviously. And he looked out, and the rain arced down and the mist. And the next morning, we went for a walk. I had a chart out and it said there was a stone circle only a mile away, over a low hill. And we marched over. Now, I was young in those days, and people didn't know as much perhaps, but I had never seen the like when we came at last to the stone circle. I was expecting the kind of thing you get in southern England, big stones, uncarven. looking not so much like anything than boulder clay. Only you know they're not. But these were remarkable. Thin pieces of slate on granite that seemed almost to carve and to dance, like so many figures moving in moonlight or by smoke shadow. I wasn't even, as I stepped towards the centre to the great king stone, even I shivered. And Carl wouldn't come in at all. I asked him what's wrong, and he said, "They're moving, can't you see? They move as they dance." And for a moment I almost saw what he meant, but I laughed and said, "No, come on. The way to break the charm is to come." And I laid out our picnic under the king's stone, whether he liked it or not. Reluctantly he came in, and he agreed that they were just stones, and we ate and listened to the wild birds, the high paean of the distant hawk. And he looked almost happy, for the sun came out. Like the next, where we walked all that day, and we came back and we lit the fire bright. "Brighter, brighter," he said. "It was brighter than that." In that strange state he had been before, his eyes staring. When I asked him about what he had said, about the king's stone and the fire being bright, I remember he said, "I didn't say anything like that. It was true the stone gave me shivers, but no more. And the fire, it's warm, but why would I say it had been warm before?" And I wondered at it. The disease he had had, it was true, gave him lapses of memory, I thought. Well, the next day I couldn't find him in the house. I looked for him, and then I went outside, and I saw that the gate was open, and there was a figure, I took it to be Carl, just disappearing over the brow of the hill towards the monoliths, and I thought, well, that's nice. I guess he liked them after all. But when he didn't come back after an hour, I went, and I came up to the moor, and he was standing on the edge of the circle, utterly frozen, not moving either way. I ran down, he didn't look well, and I laid my hands on him, and he screamed and jumped and said, "You've come!" "I've been bound here so long, while they dance and sing, take me away." Well, I led him as if he was in a trance, up to the top of the hill, and then he turned, he shook, and the young lad was there again, and the strange visionary who always stared was gone, and the lad said, "I can remember only this before you ask, that I heard a sound like an old boned flute, and came here, and I saw shivering figures dancing. But I knew the time was not right, for the moon is not high." And it was true, the moon was waxing gibbous. Well, the next day I took us fishing. Good, sensible activity, and we caught lots of mackerel. And the next day he wanted to go out again, but the sea was rough. So he spent the time gathering shellfish and ate them. Now, I am a good gatherer of shellfish, so don't think what happened after that night was to do with that. I certainly didn't at the time. The moon was now high. I remembered what he had said. I locked the door, just in case. Even so, I woke up at 1, and I thought I'll go and check, for there was something uncanny in the moonlight that filled the house with a silver light, bright, intense, and as I caught a glimpse of the stars, they seemed to be brighter than I'd ever remembered seeing them, as if centuries of pollution were gone. And the house seemed colder, older, almost larger and darker. Oh, it was still the bothy we'd been in, but just for a moment, out of the corner of my eyes, as if I was dreaming, It felt like a cave. And Carl, of course, was gone. I went down, the door was still locked, but a window was open. And I looked out the window, and I could see by moonlight 2 figures, and between them they were carrying another, as if bound. Well, I got my boots on and I ran. I ran as fast as I could, a mile or more, over the low mound. And there were the stones, wreathed in moonlight, and something akin to firelight, although I could feel no fire. And there was Carl, lying against the king's stone, in a trance. I ran up to him hard and fast. I pulled him from the stone, although it was quite a battle to make him move, as if he was bound indeed, and all the time he screamed that this was his fate. Did I not see them, dancing, dancing round? The king had him. His life was forfeit to the god of the spring. Let him go, let him go. Had this not all happened before? Would this not all happen again? Let him go. And out of the corner of my eyes I almost saw them, under his insistence. The stone seemed to be dancing, the king seemed to hold him, the knife seemed flashing. But all the while, I kept the cynicism I wore like a cloak as my protector. I refused to see the king. I refused to see the dancer. I refused to see the light of the stars so bright, never touched by the pollution of late times. I refused to see the bright moon skull bright. I rather put on a torch and tore Carl away, put him on my back. I walked that through the night with him. After an hour or more, he got off my back, and as one shivering, we walked down to the harbour. We took the boat the next day, had our things sent on to Glasgow, and on the boat he stood up one last time, for as you went out of the harbour, you got a glimpse of the Kingstone, and he said, I can never go back there, but I will always hear him calling me. Always. He waits, as he waited, as he will wait again. Well, I thought to myself, not much else to do. I gave him a top spin. Don't be so stupid, I said, and left it at that. But what happened to Carl? He left the school the year after. And whether he really escaped the Kingstone, I'm afraid I never found out again. But the entire experience left me with a horror of old dancing stones, and that misty light you get upon a summer's morning, when summer seems turned off and winter seems at hand, when the sacrifices to the gods have not been given.